Welcome one and welcome all. We are live on BerryFlow Upstream number 133. It is January 15th and we have a lot to talk about. Not
We don't.
really though.
Liar.
So James, you look kind of strange. This doesn't seem normal. Your background, everything's a little different. What's going on with you?
I'm traveling. I'm over in Atlanta right now and visiting some family, doing a little road trip, shooting some vlog material, all sorts of stuff going on. A lot in the works the next couple of days and weeks for me. So staying active. This is actually my parents' place. I'm coming to visit them, and I'm in the office, right, which is literally like the dog's room. You guys can't see it, but there's a dog bed like right over here. But I don't know why you opened the show saying we had a lot to talk about because we have absolutely nothing to talk
Yep.
about. So
I
if you're
remember.
interested in hearing about BlackBerry, you might want to just watch something else. We are going to be talking about uh, something else, right? I'm sure we're going to talk about enterprise software and all the goodies that come with it. What's on the topic list, Alex?
Oh man. We have the DTech 60 review. This was, pretty big one that we came up with, and when I say we, I mean James. We have
Yeah,
the
I had Kylie helping me too. A lot of the written stuff was both Kylie and I's perspective, kind of thrown back and forth because it's subjective when you do a review, right? Blaze can attest to this. Your experience with the device may be great, but then someone else's maybe is different. So she and I worked together on that and kind of went back and forth. The video was wholly produced by me. There's not many good DTech 60 video reviews, so we spent a good while putting that together. It's like 8 minutes long or something like that. And if you are trying to sell someone on a DTech 60 or just on Blackberries in general, show them that video. It was interesting because when that I put out the video and I actually shared it on my own personal Facebook, and I got some interesting feedback from my brother who's like, "Hey, I really like the BlackBerry. In my line of work, I see a lot of people who are actually using Blackberries." And I'm like, "Well, why are they using Blackberries?" And he says, "Mainly because of the security, and what the security is being offered." He says a lot of his peers and colleagues are also using Blackberries. So one, he never watched my reviews ever or anything like that. So he watched them and he's like, "Holy shit, these are like really well done. Like, where do you find the time and skills?" And I'm like, I don't know, to be totally fair, but he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to buy a DTech 60. It's going to be great, and it's going to satisfy all my needs for multitasking and security." Then I'm like, "Do you know there's a DTech 50?" And he's like, "What?" So I did the DTech 50 review, and I'm like, "Yeah, they have another device that's like $200 cheaper that will probably do all the same things you want." And he's like, "Oh man." And then he started going on the BerryFlow YouTube and just got lost in it for a while. And he and I were talking a little bit back and forth on that. So it is interesting that I think he's coming to look at a smartphone from a security perspective, right? I don't think that's something a lot of people are doing. So, more power to the review going out and it being there for people to just take a look at, because in his line of work, he has a lot of like, personal credit card information and things like that. And he's working through multiple apps for different clients and stuff like that. So security is really important because he's handing his device around to different people. And, it just makes you feel better at the end of the day. And we know BlackBerry is the best in the security space, at least from even just from a comfort perspective, right? In terms of what they offer and what their security has. So it was really cool for me and my brother to connect in that way, even though he's like 10 years older than I am. Generational gaps get broken down when you start talking tech. So I thought it was pretty cool. So definitely go check out the review. It's on BerryFlow. It's out there somewhere. Check the YouTubes. It's funny because you do a great video review, right? And then your written review just gets no love. It's like, oh, I'm not going to read it. There's just a great video up here. I still think that if you want the most comprehensive written review of the DTech 60, you got to go to Crackberry. I mean, Blaze breaks down every single app and its current functionality and all that stuff. So kudos to Blaze for taking the time for that, because I definitely used his review as a little bit of a reference to build mine and focus on what content I even wanted to show in the video. So thanks, Blaze. You helped.
Yay! I'm a helper.
How was your trip, man? Did you make it back safely?
Yeah, I made it back all right. I'll tell you, I never enjoyed getting back to the cold, but
Yeah.
it was all right. I mean, 2 flights basically. I stopped in Toronto and then came back to Halifax. Interesting thing though. I mean, when I always look when I travel, and I noticed that that a lot of people were using BlackBerry Bolds this time. Like BlackBerry Bold 9900s, I counted like at least 6 people that were using 9900s on the way home. And there was one guy who was sitting next to me with his wife on the flight from Toronto who actually had a BlackBerry Classic. And I didn't talk to him or anything like that because that was the last leg of my flight. I just passed out. But interesting to see how many people are still using BlackBerry OS devices, right? Like,
oh yeah.
I mean, I generally always notice it, but this time around, it just seemed like there was an excessive amount. Usually you see like 1 or 2 or 3, not 6, man. I've seen at least 6 people using Bolt 9900. Kind of crazy.
I'm lucky if I see 6 in like a year, but Blaze is over at the airport like, what phone is that?
Right.
Silent, but observing. It's cool to see them in the wild because you wonder what circumstances these people come from. Is it just a corporate device they were given, or is it like their actual choice and preference? And I find a majority, when I have spoken with people and been a little bit more, a little bit less introverted than I normally am, and I spark up those conversations, it's like half and half. It's some of them are just like, yeah, I got it for work and it works and I use it. And other people are like, I'm a diehard, I'm using it because I want it. It's just really cool to see those different people's perspectives. And in what you observed, Ways, do you think it was mostly like corporate devices that were handed out? Is that your thinking?
Definitely. I mean, mostly everybody who I saw was dressed up in like business suits, and this was in Toronto, so
yeah.
I mean, kind of have to keep that in mind as well. But there was a lot of people in business suits, a lot of older gentlemen that were walking around using them. So there was even one older couple who were the older gentleman was trying to tell his wife how to basically navigate on her Bold 9900 through the site, and he literally said like, I don't think that the BlackBerry can show that portion of the site. And then he was like taking out his iPhone and showing her, which I don't know, that not a great testament to the age of the OS, but it was definitely something that was interesting to hear. Like, no, I don't think the BlackBerry is going to show that. Let me pull it up on my iPhone, right? So kind of weird.
It's just bizarre that problem was solved with BlackBerry 10.
Yeah.
And yet like BlackBerry never, like, it was weird because, and I don't know if it was like the fact that they were so focused on the smartphone at the time and maybe not so focused on BES 12 and BES and how that was evolving, but the BlackBerry work-life balance on BB10 literally was built to avoid that problem so that you could have both lives, your work and personal on one phone and do it in a super seamless way and have a hub that worked across both of them, across both sides of that partition, right? I mean, that's literally what that phone was built for, so that people wouldn't have to carry a Bold 9900 and an iPhone. And yet we still see people today who now have a Classic and then an iPhone, or, some other type of BlackBerry and an iPhone and or, a Samsung device. It's just kind of crazy to think there are solutions to the problem, but the CIOs and the IT guys, maybe Alex can explain why this is the case, but are still clinging to this dual phone thing that's going on. I don't know if it's like BYOD meets the corporate needs and you got to have 2 to satisfy both sides. Like, I'm not quite sure because there's so many solutions nowadays. It's like people get stuck in something they're comfortable in and then they don't want to leave it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. What are your thoughts on it, Alex? Why do you think there's that dichotomy?
No, I mean, this is like a really small scale. But looking at some of my clients, the clients that have 2 phones, like one for work and one for personal, oftentimes it's kind of an older person. I think it's just simplicity. So yes, it's a pain to carry 2 phones with you, but they know I'm on this phone, this is all my business stuff, and I'm not screwing around with personal, and I don't need to understand that, if I do something personal on my work phone, like it's very simple to know that. Whereas the younger generation, or at least someone who's taken the time to learn truly how to use their phone, and like, here's the work segment, here's the personal segment. It is tough though, because like that's definitely not 100% case. I think it comes up to the person. Sometimes they like having 2 phones because, hey, I can use this phone all day and it'll die, and now I have a backup phone, my personal phone or my work phone, and now I have like a fully refreshed battery that I can use. So some use it because they get additional battery in that sense. Other people use it just for simplicity. Other people, I mean, I'm of the camp that's just a pain to carry 2 phones with you. So, figure out how to make it work business and personal. But I don't know. Unless it gets pushed down from the top down, or the IT department saying you need to use one phone, and like here, I mean, realistically, I've pushed it on a few companies, and I'm like, we can get everything you need on this one phone. And really, the younger generation, they're okay with it. The older generation, they complain, and they're like, no, 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 I want both phones. It's just the way I want to be able to make a call, and the number that dials out is this number. I don't want to have to go to an app to make a call to make sure they don't get my personal number, and a bunch of little things like that, you know. So I'm not entirely sure though. That's just kind of what I've seen a little bit. But next on deck, kind of what we were seeing here is the BlackBerry Developer Summit in Europe happening in London on March 24th. Do you think anything special is going to happen, or is just, same old developer summit kind of stuff?
It's interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Was it like it's a enterprise developer summit as well, because BlackBerry has essentially moved all their development status stuff over to enterprise development at this point. So it's kind of like the developer conference that we saw in New York, only maybe less splashy this time because they were actually unveiling the platform when they did it in New York. And that's why they chose to essentially go ahead and have the Europe one, was because they basically got feedback from the enterprise side of things that they wanted to be able to go ahead and check these things out in such a capacity with the developer platform. But there was none of that stuff was available in Europe. So this is an opportunity for them to go ahead and basically introduce these things to developers who are interested in picking it up in Europe. So I don't expect anything super splashy to happen. It's just a developer event that people will go to, but hopefully in the long term, I mean, those developer events are things, that's how apps get built. That's how people learn about new things, right? So even though we don't generally see it on our side, that is the reality of it. That's how people learn about this stuff. So, it's good that they'll have it available for people to attend.
Totally. Even with with BlackBerry UEM and the whole app platform behind it, going to a region and getting developers who are building those apps for companies in that region, I think is critical, because that just brings the value of UEM up for those individual businesses who maybe need a specialized app for their employees. So I think it's a great idea to go there, get with the local community in the area and say, all right, here's our platform. You may have an app already. Let's bring it on board and show you how you can weave it into this whole solution so that you can increase your security credentials and overall flexibility too. So definitely, as Blaze mentioned, it's something good to do. Maybe not as flashy this go around, but maybe they've learned a little bit also from those earlier releases that they can take in and compound on some of the information that they're able to give. As well, we've talked many months on this podcast about a lot of the London and UK focus that we're seeing there in Europe. So I think it's just great to have presence there as well, because a lot of the businesses and customers that they're looking for are all about it. You know what I'm saying? They're all about having that corporate security. So I think it's pretty great to have some presence there, have the BlackBerry name out. I think it's just positive overall. What else do we have, Alex?
I was wondering, how do you get the dark theme kind of working on the BlackBerry Hub on Android? Is that a thing that you can do now? I was hearing a couple things.
Yeah. So first, before we talk about dark theme, which is the name of the podcast, right? I think it's a clever thing to do because it's like a statement almost, I think, to a lot of the PDUs out there. And it's a foreshadowing in a way. And Blaze, maybe you can speak on this in your own line of sight. But if I'm someone who's looking at the BlackBerry camp and I'm looking at BB10, which they just pushed an update to, which they could have potentially thrown dark theme into, right? I mean, they could have. They've told us it's a security update, tossing in that little Easter egg just as like a, thanks for being our user, pat on the back for you guys. They could have done it. They didn't. They focused solely on the NIAP certification and some underlying improvements. The fact that on Android, they're addressing customer concerns and bringing them the dark theme, to me, it's a very clear indication of BlackBerry's commitment to Android versus BB10. And I don't want to say they're not committed to BB10 because, of course, we know there's a forthcoming update to, again, increase the security credentials. But again, if you're a consumer in any sense that's really looking for a secure alternative that's more flexible, that's going to get support longer term, Android's the way to go. And if you're a user who does want, dark theme, you got to take it for what it is, that what you want is on now an operating system that you may or may not use, right? So to me, it's a very clear indication that BlackBerry's saying, hey guys, go to Android, please go to Android, because that's where we are. What do you think, Blaze?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I totally agree with what you said. I mean, like you said, they could have gone ahead and put it in there, but everything was focused around the security update and all of that with 10.3.3. So, I mean, if you want it, it's there, it's available. You just have to move on over to Android. So, you got to make that choice because I don't think it's going to make its way backwards to BlackBerry. So
yeah. And that's the you said it perfectly, backwards. They're not looking that way anymore. It's solely what's ahead that's important to BlackBerry. And just in terms of like adoptability and stuff like that, Android's just so much more flexible. And you got to think, if someone were to buy it, one of the early problems with like the Z10 for early adopters was they downloaded it. They ended up, they didn't download, they bought it, right? They got it to work. They got through the learning curve, but then ultimately came to the point where there's no apps. I don't have Netflix, or I don't have Spotify, and this is the early days, right? Where we didn't have the Amazon App Store to actually supplement a lot of that. So if you think about it, if you pick up a Priv, right, you may end up saying like, I'm not too keen on the hardware itself, but the software supports what I need. It does have all those apps, right? I have Google Play and I have the flexibility. So you're less likely to get returns and things like that on something like an Android smartphone. And I think the same cadence holds true for what BlackBerry's doing with some of their latest Android smartphones like the DTEK 50, DTEK 60, and forthcoming Mercury. It's that I may hand you a BlackBerry, but long term, you're going to stay for the software experience that you get on it. And that is ultimately predominantly powered by Android, right? And all the flexibility that Android brings. So at the end of the day, you may feel some type of way about the hardware that you get, but ultimately the software is just going to solidify your uses and give you the access to the things that you really want. So if I'm a salesperson who's looking to sell a BlackBerry to someone, I should absolutely be trying to push the Android solution because I'm very likely going to have less problems in terms of support and app compatibility and all those things offering that Android solution. Whereas on the BB10, it may be much more secure than the Android version, but at the same point, it's going to be a harder pressed solution to actually get that support, get those apps on board that the actual employee may need to use. So it's just a good strategy, I think, for BlackBerry to focus on the Android piece. And Alex, you wrote up an article on Reddit. No, you wrote up an article on Crackberry forums. Maybe it was on Reddit, then you moved it to Crackberry forums, then you moved it to BerryFlow. Either way, it's a great article that got a lot of traction. They had at least on BerryFlow, 50 plus comments just talking about why Android is a great move for BlackBerry. And maybe you can throw that somewhere for people to read, Alex, if you want to dig it up for them. But read that because it talks a lot about why Android is such a smart move for BlackBerry. And even as we look toward some of the licensing and things that BlackBerry is doing, even the joint venture, Android just makes sense for BlackBerry to be at right now. And I honestly feel, had they done it earlier, it might have been very good for them as well. But now that they are here and they're pushing Nougat potentially to these devices in the future, dark theme and having these app updates is something they definitely need. When we talked about Mercury in our after show last week, we talked about, I talked about my fears that the BlackBerry software experience isn't as aggressive as TCL's hardware, push that we're clearly seeing. I mean, this deal with TCL, we've already seen 2 devices hit the market almost months apart from one another. And now we have a Mercury handset coming as well. So they're going pretty aggressively in the hardware front. But if BlackBerry is not there pushing that software forward at a similar pace, people are going to feel left behind in a sense, right? Especially if Nougat comes to the Mercury and then it lags for some of the other smartphones. I mean, people are going to feel some type of way about it. Things like bringing dark theme to the hub on Android, I think, are super important because those little things are what are going to keep that experience moving forward for a lot of users out there. And I think it's something that's super positive. I think it looks really, really good as well. I don't know why, but the little hub ribbon colors that you're able to assign to your accounts, they just pop and have more color and contrast on the dark theme look. So it's actually much more easier to look at and organize and get an overall view of what's in your hub on the dark theme. So I think it's just a really great solution. And I hope they keep doing things like that. It was funny, Blaze, on Crackberry, I saw in the comment section, someone's like, it's not dark enough. It's not black,
Yep.
Yeah, it's not real black.
Yeah, and it's okay, you're right. You're totally correct. It's not dark enough to necessarily turn off those AMOLED pixels, but the end of the day, it is what people have been asking for. So you give people what they want, they're still not necessarily totally satisfied.
Well, so
So
that's the big thing that like just with design in general. If you use just pure black, then you need to lighten it up to to have breaks and things like that. Whereas when you're using like a darker gray, then you can use black or a little bit darker gray to break things up. So visually you can get something that looks really nice if you're using dark grays, but once you do just a black user interface, it's going to be very ugly yet functional. So you're always going to have that kind of discrepancy. It's like, I want pure black because it's going to turn off AMOLED and I want the battery savings. And then there are other people, if they did that, they'd be like, this looks terrible. Like, okay, I don't care that it gives me battery savings if I
Right.
have an AMOLED
The
phone.
complaints wouldn't be about the battery then. It would be just complaining about
The
how terrible.
design. Yeah, exactly. How functional.
And
So, yeah.
realistically, I mean, come on, let's put it into a grand perspective here. How much
Oh, yeah.
does battery get saved just by using
No.
a pure black? I mean, if everything on your device was black, sure, but if you're only changing one app,
Yeah.
then you're not even. It's nominal. Like, who cares? You're not even going to notice it. It's like 2% per day or something like that.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to care.
hey, if you're a hardcore gamer, that 2% may go a
Oh,
long
boy.
way.
Oh, boy. I saw that
I
little
use
gesture there.
BlackBerry's app on Android into black because, why not? If it's there and it's an option, I'd use it. And I think a lot of people, if it defaults to that dark gray, good.
Mm-hmm.
But if black was an option, why not? People might use it. And again, maybe a forthcoming update, right? This dark theme is still in beta, if I'm correct, Blaze. So it's not necessarily wholly available to everyone right now. But once it is, options are good. And leave yourself some runway to continue adding other things on, right? You throw it all at once, people are just going to be like, oh, too much, right? And just leave it where it is. Slow and progressive updates give them a roadmap to build on the software experience. I'm still just waiting for the productivity edge to get updated with something, because it's like I want to use it, but there's nothing really to use it, It's so redundant in a lot of ways because in Android, you can slide down to get your notifications. The hub has all your notifications, and then the edge has your notifications and emails. So it's like there's 3 different ways to get to one type of thing. It needs to be rounded out in a more seamless way. Just add some app shortcuts, that's all I need.
There's also not enough integration is not really the right word, but that's what it is. It's basically integration with cloud services and stuff like that. Throughout the Notes app and stuff, like, yeah, you can go ahead and, like, I was reading a forums post earlier from a few days ago, and basically someone switched devices from, I don't know what it was. I wasn't really paying attention that much, but let's just say for the sake of it, it was like a Priv to a DTEC 60 or something like that, and they had a ton of notes that were in BlackBerry Notes, and then when they switched, those notes were all basically gone, right? Yep. Now there is ways that you can go ahead in the BlackBerry Notes app, if you're using a supported account, that all of that stuff will automatically just sync back up, right? But if you're not using a supported account, or if you're just using local notes, then basically that stuff doesn't get backed up. And the real question there is, like, why doesn't that stuff get backed up? Why doesn't BlackBerry go ahead and add in that capability to be able to go ahead and back those things up to make it easier when people move around? I think that's something that really needs to be improved within BlackBerry's Android right now. Is, I guess it's not a real word, but the backup ability, I guess you could say, is like something that they need to work on. Because if I'm moving from device to device, then if I want to continue making use of those BlackBerry apps, even if it's not on a BlackBerry specific device, they make it really hard to be able to go ahead and transition those things because they don't have any cloud integration developed into them. Like, if I move from a Priv to a DTEC 60, I want my notes to automatically move. I want my password keeper to move. I want all my calendar and contacts and stuff like that to be able to move. And some of that integration is there, but some of it's really not. It's like they didn't think about other people moving to different devices. But now that you're offering this suite of things to pretty much the whole Android ecosystem, you really need to start thinking about that stuff, because people really do appreciate that in the long run. Like, nobody wants to have like 10,000 notes in their Notes app and then manually have to transfer them over, right?
Oh, and even worse than that, like, I mean, I have a client I just met with the other day, and he has all of his passwords in his Note app. He's not using BlackBerry specifically, but it's not synced up to the cloud. And one thing is, he said that he deleted the note, somewhat recently, lost all of his passwords. And it's like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, there's a few problems with that, but that's kind of the thing. Not having it backed up by BlackBerry causes things like this to happen, and then people start hating BlackBerry because they screwed up. Like, their Notes app is the one that screwed up. It wasn't, their fault or something like that. So I think it's a
Right.
no-brainer that they at least have some type of cloud functionality there for
Yeah.
Notes. Like, you could talk about security and things like that, but like, you can encrypt even, password keeper, LastPass and FirstPass and or OnePass. Like, all this exists already for a reason, and we need it because people that aren't using it, they're going nuts.
Yeah, and that's the other side of it too. I mean, I totally get the whole security aspect of it, but I mean, as long as it remains an optional thing and isn't turned on by default, then you don't really have to worry about it. Like,
Yeah.
as long as you're going through the regular steps to be able to go ahead and one, secure that stuff, provided people do enable it, and two, make it optional, then the security concerns are sort of erased at that point, because
Yeah.
it's the end user opting in to be able to go ahead and take control of that stuff, right? And I don't know, it's just one of those things. It becomes increasingly crucial, especially if people are switching devices. Like, nobody wants to lose data, and
Oh, no.
unfortunately, that's what's currently happening with the way that some of the systems are set up right now. And I think BlackBerry there's an opportunity there to go ahead and improve it. So
Yeah,
No,
and I think the,
definitely.
the way to improve it is through integration, not necessarily building it yourself. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
like, and that's, if they tacked in Google Keep to the Notes app, or to the Tasks app, or plugged into some other APIs that are available through partners, that's the best solution. I mean, especially in terms of the seamless user experience, Blaze, where I could tap my old device to my new device and things transfer over. People think, okay, great, it's all going to transfer over, but then my
Yeah.
contacts aren't there, my notes aren't there, and all the stuff that was in my BlackBerry apps is not there, right? And that's a really, really frustrating thing for people who expect it to be seamless and
Yeah.
then it's not. So I
right.
totally agree. There's a lot of work that can be done, and as we've said before on past streams as well, it's like, how hard is it to throw a file manager together? How hard is it to go ahead and really up the BlackBerryness of your Android experience? Because right now it's essentially stock Android, and to force your users to then explore Google Play's millions of apps to try to find a solution that they got out of the box before, again, hurts the user experience to a degree, right? They may find a better solution than they could have ever imagined, but they have to go find it and potentially pay for
Or
it,
just
right?
partner up with someone that already made the file manager. Like, there are some phenomenal file managers, and it's like, if BlackBerry just partnered up to make one pre-installed, like, I don't know. I'm sure it's
Or
something to
just
be
buy
worked
Right.
out.
one, right?
James, you said it. You said it a few seconds ago.
Yeah.
Like, they're moving from a system that previously offered these things, and arguably, that is those integrations and those connections are what made BlackBerry 10 really, really good, right? So
Yep.
why wouldn't you go ahead and sort of make that same correlation on your Android OS? Like, I know, I'm not saying that they should go ahead and take over everything and basically touch with it up. I'm just saying that they need to have these integrations within their own applications to make them more robust, which
Mhm.
ultimately makes the software itself more robust. You don't need
Yeah.
to weigh things down. You just need to basically offer more within what your own solutions are. Like, you don't have
And
to go core level with it. Just basically add on to stuff that is already pre-existing with your own apps.
if I was BlackBerry, and this is probably a terrible idea, and I probably shouldn't tell BlackBerry, and people are probably going to be upset that I even mentioned this, but if I was BlackBerry, I would put so I would sell ad space in the form of suggested apps for good app solutions to plug the holes, so that there's a reoccurring revenue, but then the user ultimately decides whether they want to go get it, right? Put Solid Explorer as a suggested app at the top of my launcher, right? I might just go download it and be like, oh crap, this is just like VB10. It's awesome, right?
Yeah.
So you don't even need to necessarily go build it or partner or pay for support or whatever, but it's a simple way for people to get access to
Yeah.
those things. And it's BlackBerry recommended or
Yeah.
BlackBerry suggested. And that's a super low level way for them to go, at least, partner up and do that. It's interesting
But
that
what
Google Pixel Launcher does something similar to that already, just suggest apps to you. And I turn that off personally because I hate that, but
what
it's something
happens
that
what happens though if, like, say they recommend Solid Explorer, and then all of a sudden Solid Explorer gets bought out by Cheetah Mobile, and then they put viruses on it, and people are like, BlackBerry recommended viruses to me. Like, can it come back to them?
And that's a great thing that they, for some reason, preload Lookout on the phones, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know if BlackBerry understands how that happened, but okay.
They don't, because I've talked to support about it, and they had no idea that it was there. Anyway, let's kind of close this out. There is a 40% off all accessories from Shop BlackBerry right now. So, does anyone want to speak on that?
Yeah, go to crackberry.com. There's a nice list of all of those BlackBerry shops by region. Click on that. It'll send you to your specific region for Shop BlackBerry, and you're good to go. And you can pick up all your accessories. I know a lot of people who are picking up like some older devices. I mean, the Priv's at a really good price in a lot of places. So it's nice that these accessories are available. They're OEM accessories, and they're nice. I mean, I really, really like some of them that BlackBerry has, especially some of the like the cases for the D-Tech 50, something like the smart sleeves. My mom uses that on her D-Tech 50, and she loves it. The fact that she can answer a call without having to take the phone out, I mean, she really digs that. And the fact that she can throw it in her purse and know it's basically totally covered except for that small little screen, she loves that. There's a lot of good accessories in there. I also highly recommend the Priv hard shell with the kickstand. I would not get the regular shell, but definitely get the kickstand. It's a little bit more expensive, but you get the kickstand and you get a nice texture on the back, whereas you just get the flat plastic on the standard one. I like that one. There's some good holsters if you're a holster guy. I know there's some holster lovers out there who just will not get away from the holster, so there's some good holsters in there as well. 40% off. I mean, this is what you're waiting for. A lot of people wait on sales to go shop at Shop BlackBerry. This is the time to do it. Something you could do is, buy your accessories and then wait for that device sale, and then you've got your accessories ready to go as well. So go to crackberry.com, check out the post, and again, there's links to all the regions. Click on your region and go make a purchase.
All right.
That's it. Let's jump into this after show, because I got to talk about WhatsApp and why all of this news is recirculating about WhatsApp security for no reason. Why? This is the same. We'll get there.
It's fake news.
All right,
it's fake news. Wrong.
We will talk to you next week. See you later.
See you guys.